What exactly determines whether a job is hard to play? It is indeed a lot of things, and some things affect some players more than others, and sometimes what content you do can also matter in regards to which job is the hardest. Now, to help me answer the question of which ranged physical is the hardest, I sent out a poll to ask all of you. A lot of you did vote, and while there was a surprise, the spread was something I could anticipate. Now, you may have already peeked at the video length or even the chapters and noticed that multiple jobs are up for debate, and indeed, we will be talking about what could make each job feel difficult, ranging between many different skill levels, all the way from casual to hardcore optimization trying to squeeze every single point of damage possible. We will be talking about the jobs in order from easiest to hardest as well. Also, some of you might be saying, what's the point? Dawntrail is coming real soon anyway. And the point is exactly to see if these jobs become easier with Dawntrail. And with that, let's get started. For each job, we'll be talking about the general difficulties and challenges of the job, the difficulty in the leveling experience, the difficulty in a more casual setting where at most you might typically try to optimize around your own cooldowns, and the difficulty in a coordinated raid group setting where we try to see how much you can optimize and how hard that would be when coordinating with the entire team. For the easiest job, with only about 1/10 of the votes, we have Dancer. The things that make Dancer stand out as particularly difficult is the fact that the job starts at level 60, introducing a lot of things all at once, the randomness of Dancer, and finally the fact that the job is rather burst-centric. Meaning that if you don't understand how to put together a burst sequence, Dancer might either feel like it doesn't make sense or feel confusing to use. Compared to other jobs starting at a higher level, Dancer's initial barrier to entry is a lot lower simply because nearly all of the actions it learns to start are filler GCDs and standard step, and a set of OGCDs that directly interact with the filler rotation. However, this can also cause newer dancers to get caught in this constantly looking at the hotbar scenario to keep track of procs or perform dance moves, which can make some new dancers appear almost outright blind to boss mechanics. Leveling Dancer, once the initial barrier has been overcome, mainly becomes more complex with the addition of temporary buff cooldowns like Devilment and Technical Step, as well as more, stronger attacks to add into such a burst window. This means that as the job levels up, it gets more and more focused on a builder-spender style rotation, with building feathers and later esprit to spend during the burst window that the dancer itself is responsible for producing. Of course, the random nature of the filler combos and the feather procs can still be confusing for some players. And for those that it doesn't confuse or excite, apparently it bores them to death, making Dancer brutally difficult. Yes, I saw you too. For the casual, personal optimization at max level, because of how Dancer is structured, a lot of it builds directly on top of what you would have possibly learned while leveling. Precasting standard step to run its cooldown before fight starts is perhaps something that is less likely to be learned just while leveling the job. And avoiding traps like using Devilment first before Technical Step can be another factor. But ultimately, as Dancer provides its own raid buffs, optimizing for yourself will be mostly the same as optimizing for the raid, which involves using Standard Step close to on cooldown, using Flourish on cooldown, using Technical Step on cooldown and aligning Devilment with the technical finish, and then using your best attacks during this burst window. And learning how to properly vent resources without spending it all outside of bursts. Meaning sitting on 3 feathers rather than 4, and not peaking at 100 esprit gauge. This can lead to a bunch of things to keep track of, and combined with the randomness of procs, it can lead to the previously mentioned constantly looking at the bars problem. For raid coordinated optimization, the main thing to learn is to get used to precasting standard step on point so your opener can be consistent, and using technical step and devilment as close to exactly on cooldown as possible so you don't drift from the rest of the coordinated raid's burst. Given the openness of the dancer rotation, this should not be a bigger problem unless a boss messes with burst timings. In which case, knowing when to hold technical step can be a significant factor. Next, for the middle of the pack, with equally middle of the pack of the votes, we have Machinist. When initially unlocked at level 30, the job has the bare bones of the primary concepts the job deals with. A 1-2-3 combo, an OGCD in Gauss round, Hotshot as a tool, an AoE filler, reassemble, and of course, hypercharge. However, the job yet lacks some of the actions that make these options make more sense. As the job levels, it mainly adds more and more attack buttons and never learns a damage buff of its own, which is a major factor in the comparison between casual and raid coordinated optimization. When leveling Machinist, the name of the game is almost always, here's a new thing to use, it's going to be super awkward to use, we'll give you the thing that makes it good later. This happens with Hypercharge first, that starts to make more sense once Heat Blast and also Crossbow are learned. Reassemble is also really awkward since your best spender of it is Clean Shot, but this makes more sense once tools like Drill are picked up. Another example is Wildfire, which leads to a really awkward opener until Barrel Stabilizer is learned. And of course, Hotshot makes very little sense until Rook Auto Turret is learned. A cooldown that does medium damage and isn't even your strongest attack. Machinist simply has a leveling experience where, as you level up, the toolkit makes more and more sense, and while it can get overwhelming with the amount of actions used per minute by this speedy job, most of the toolkit is somewhat intuitive. Tools are used on cooldown, OGCDs are used when available, reassembles go on big attacks. Wildfire goes with Heat Blast, and of course, the freedom to use your battery gauge almost when you feel like it does make Machinist feel very flexible while leveling it. For a casual personal optimization perspective at max level, Machinist has a similar outlook to the leveling experience. Tools are to be used on cooldown, OGCD attacks on cooldown, reassembles go on the tools whenever available, and battery can be used whenever you have enough or you feel like it. Wildfire is usually used close to on cooldown, making sure Hypercharge does not delay a tool, and aside from that, spending heat in between tool usages is possibly the bigger challenge of the casual Machinist. The job does have a few traps, where the overdrive button and the detonator button should almost never be used, but them being in the toolkit may give the impression they should be used. Flamethrower existing, but often being a loss rather than a gain, regardless of context, if you don't know what to do with it to get it right. But aside from all this, because Machinist itself does not really have a way to boost its own damage directly in a casual setting, it can become a lot of random stuff, go! And that is often good enough. However, those that know how to optimize Machinist may already realize that once you get into raid coordinated optimization, this story changes quite drastically. Because the rest of your raid have damage buffs, and you of course do have tinctures. Machinist can make a burst window as needed, which leads to two common openers between early air anchor and delayed tools, depending on what you need. And once the opener is finished, the rotation itself is so strict that pressing the wrong button at the wrong time can ruin your rotation for the rest of the battle. Pressing the wrong button means either not using a tool when a tool was available, using Hypercharge at the wrong time, and to a much less devastating degree, using Automaton Queen on the wrong side of a tool. Because the rotation has no random factors, however, it means you can truly spreadsheet the rotation for a given fight, which leads to this interesting situation where, depending on who you ask, the job can be viewed as really easy and exceptionally hard, with more casual players and extremely hardcore players possibly viewing it as very easy, where those in between may find it exceptionally hard due to how punishing making a single mistake can be. And finally, for the hardest of the three, Bard, with over 3/5 of the votes, is weirdly the only one of the three that starts at level 1. What makes Bard particularly difficult is that it in some ways combines what makes Dancer and Machinist difficult into one thing, and then adds more stuff on top. It has the stacking of buff cooldowns like Dancer, the random elements like Dancer, and the rapid-fire OGCD spam of Machinist. And through the rather strict system with the songs, sort of also produces the strictness of the Machinist rotation alongside the rest. Adding in things like dot management and the fact that multiple of the random procs you need to react to cannot wait, compared to Dancer where you don't have to react to a proc immediately, and when dancing, you can see the full sequence at the start. This makes Bard just that much harder by comparison. The leveling experience of Bard has a few particular high points that really impact the rotation, with the addition of Mage's Ballad and Army's Paean adding a lot more to manage for the Bard, with more like a 30-second downtime period followed by 90 seconds of uptime, that then turn into a full looping rotation of some sort once Wanderer's Minuet comes in, with this unique feature that you have more song time than you would ever need, with 135 seconds of song for 2 minutes of cooldown, which can mislead a lot of Bard players and confuse yet others, as it means it falls to the player themselves to remember to loop these songs correctly. The fact that Wanderer's Minuet comes in last, but is best used first, also causes confusion in the leveling experience. Once Iron Jaws is learned, making dot management more important to not forget, not that much is further added to the rotation that is particularly impactful aside from things like Apex Arrow. Yet, the management of dots, cooldown alignment, and properly cycling through songs is already plenty to make Bard a very overwhelming job to play. Meaning that while the core meat of the job is already mostly unlocked by level 56, the remaining leveling of the job not adding that much more in nearly the same difficulty to the job beyond extra buttons that have to align with what is already there. In a casual personal optimization context at max level, because Bard already comes packaged with raid buffs and personal buffs, optimizing around just yourself is just about the same as optimizing for the raid. Mostly. Making sure Wanderer's Minuet aligns with Raging Strikes, Barrage, Battle Voice, and Radiant Finale, maintaining dots, and using procs when you get them, perhaps stockpiling a Bloodletter or two for the burst. Ultimately, the really hard parts about the job is that it can easily get caught in a similar problem as Dancer, just in a much greater degree, since you can get caught up constantly checking dot timers, checking for Refulgent Arrow procs, checking in on your songs. Did you get a repertoire proc? Do you need to do anything with that? Is it time to switch song yet? How are my dots doing? Do I have Refulgent Arrow? Oh wait, there's a boss mechanic. Did I forget to use Bloodletter? When do I need to switch song? Oh, my Apex Arrow is just about ready. I do have that extra one every odd minute. Is it time to use it yet? Oh wait, my dots dropped. I imagine you get the picture. Bard has a lot of things to keep track of, and while some of them can be simplified by making sure they line up with each other, such as reapplying dots whenever you switch song, others simply demand you respond to them immediately on time, like Refulgent Arrow. And while some things are less punishing to get wrong, such as Refulgent Arrow, others can be devastating, like forgetting to switch song on time, which can crush your rotation for minutes, or letting your dots drop, of course. This leads to Bard being a very punishing job that is out to get you at every turn. Going to raid coordinated optimization, the main things that change is the addition of tinctures and the greater significance of making sure your songs are aligned all the time. Because when you optimize for just yourself, if you're a bit slow to switch song on time, you can just push everything a few seconds back and adjust accordingly. But if you're aligning with the raid, being late on a song change can be a problem. And being slightly more late than that can be outright disastrous for your performance, as well as your damage output. All of this adds together to make the raid-coordinated optimization experience a much stricter version of the casual experience. And, of course, when bosses get in the way of your timings, such as putting you down for the count when you need to switch to Mage's Ballad, can of course completely destroy your rotation if you aren't ready for it. So, before we round up, there are a few factors that I do recognize also play into a ranking of difficulty of jobs. Naturally, players that main a given job typically find that job a lot easier to play, meaning, for example, that people that never played Dancer might be inclined to say Dancer is hard. Similarly, Bard mains would be less likely to say that Bard was hardest. Another factor is that in a poll like this, some people might just vote on whatever they believe is hardest, and both Machinist and Bard are known to be difficult, which can further inflate their numbers. Such a poll also gathers results from all skill levels, from new players to veterans, from hyper-casuals to hardcore Savage Raiders. Anyone could have voted. And finally, there's of course also players that vote randomly just for the sake of it, or vote based on something other than actual difficulty, which can sometimes skew the results a bit. However, I do feel that the jobs did get ranked in a way that makes sense with the things we know would make a job difficult. Now, to summarize, the difficulty of Dancer is heavily concentrated in dealing with the random factors of the job, which can lead to hyperfixation on hotbars to track these things. The job also has a built-in burst window of its own, which means you can't just mash buttons randomly without it potentially costing you. Machinist, on the other hand, has no buffs of their own, allowing them, in a casual setting, to press their buttons almost as they see fit, with the main highlights being using cooldowns on cooldown, and making sure hypercharges don't get in the way of that. Which of course means the basic difficulty of Machinist is in the amount of things to press, which then evolves into the strictness of the rotation when playing around raid buffs, where it goes from very freeform to do exactly this or else, which can cause the job to feel extremely difficult for a player still learning this level of perfection. Bard gains most of its difficulty from the dots and proc management alongside song management, which culminates in their built-in bursts. This places Bard in a position where the job can be extremely difficult to play at all stages of the game, with the easier experience often being attained by either truly mastering the job or just not caring, which of course applies for all jobs when it really comes to it, right? I admit that I probably may have forgotten details or maybe have even skipped quietly over something important in my analysis in this video, so if you have anything to add about the difficulty or ease of any of the jobs, I would love to hear about it in the comments. Now, that is all for this video. Thank you so much for watching. If you would like to support me and my channel more directly, you can become a member like these wonderful people here. You can also alternatively support me through Ko-Fi, link in the description. You can also support the channel by letting the YouTube algorithm know by liking the video, leaving a comment, subscribing, sharing, and hitting the bell to get notified when next I post a video. Fun fact, in A Realm Reborn and Heavensward, Mage's Ballad was an aura you could turn on that recovered MP for the party, and reduced the damage you did. The repertoire effect the song has now was instead a trait called River of Blood, not to be confused with that Elden Ring katana, that gave your dot ticks a chance to reset Bloodletter fully as opposed to only halfway as it is now. Back then, Bloodletter only had one charge anyway, so you essentially had to try and weave it all the time as a result.